Canyon Lake is vanishing. Right now, as you read this, Canyon Lake in Texas is losing water. Not slowly, not in a way that gives anyone time to adjust. 34 million gallons every single day are disappearing from this reservoir, and the people who depend on it are beginning to ask a question no one wants to answer. What happens when it runs out? 34 million gallons a day. Let that number sit for a moment. That is not a leak. That is not a storm drain. That is the equivalent of draining more than 50 Olympic swimming pools every single hour, around the clock, 7 days a week, with almost nothing coming back in to replace it. And this is not happening in a desert wasteland. This is happening in the Texas Hill Country, a region that was never supposed to run dry. To understand why this matters so deeply, you have to understand what Canyon Lake actually is, and what it was built to be. Canyon Lake sits in Comal County, roughly halfway between San Antonio and Austin. It was created in the early 1960s when the United States Army Corps of Engineers dammed the Guadalupe River. The project took years. The reservoir did not fill to capacity overnight. It took time, patience, and the slow accumulation of rainfall and river flow across an enormous watershed before the lake became what it was designed to be, a permanent, reliable water source for one of the fastest growing regions in America. For decades, it worked exactly as intended. Canyon Lake held steady. It absorbed floods. It provided drinking water. It became a recreational destination that drove an entire regional economy. Boaters, swimmers, vacation homeowners, marina operators, and small businesses all built their lives around the assumption that the water would always be there. And for a long time, it was. But something changed, and the moment it changed is the moment this story truly begins. In recent years, Canyon Lake began dropping to levels that had never been recorded before. The lake that had never fallen below half capacity within living memory suddenly began exposing ground that had not seen sunlight in over 60 years. Old fence posts emerged from the water. Tree stumps appeared where boats once drifted. Bleached white rings of exposed limestone began creeping up the shoreline like a warning painted by the earth itself. Then came the brief relief. Heavy flooding pushed water back into the lake and raised levels enough that some believed the crisis had passed. People exhaled. The headlines moved on. But the water did not stay. The lake began dropping again, this time with even less rainfall in the forecast, even more demand on the system, and even less time to wait for natural recovery that may not come. 34 million gallons a day. Every single day, gone. To truly feel the weight of that number, consider this. The average American household uses roughly 300 gallons of water per day. That means Canyon Lake is currently losing the equivalent of what more than 100,000 families use in an entire day. And it is losing that much every 24 hours. If you lined up all the water tanker trucks needed to haul away 34 million gallons, that convoy would stretch for miles. And yet nature is pulling it out silently, invisibly, through evaporation, through seepage, through a rainfall deficit that keeps growing wider with every dry week that passes. The Texas Hill Country has entered a period of extended drought that climate scientists describe not as a temporary weather event, but as a structural shift in the region's relationship with water. The aquifers that once reliably recharged are recharging more slowly. The rainfall that fed the Guadalupe River watershed for generations has become erratic and insufficient, and the population that depends on all of it has been growing at a pace that the water supply was never designed to support. That last part is the detail that changes everything. Canyon Lake was not built for the Texas Hill Country of today. When engineers designed the reservoir in the 1960s, the region around it was quiet. Small towns, ranches, river cabins. The population of Comal County was a fraction of what it is now. New Braunfels, the county seat, was a small German heritage community known for its river tubing and its Christmas market. not for explosive suburban expansion. Today, the picture is entirely different. New Braunfels has become one of the fastest growing cities in the entire United States, not just in Texas, but in the entire country, consistently ranking at or near the top of national growth charts year after year. People have been moving to the Texas Hill Country from California, from the Pacific Northwest, from the Midwest, drawn by lower costs, warmer weather, and a quality of life that the region built largely on the back of abundant outdoor recreation. Recreation that depends on water. More people means more homes. More homes means more taps. More taps means more daily demand. And more daily demand layered on top of a lake that is already losing 34 million gallons a day means that the math, very quickly, stops working. To see where this can lead, you do not have to imagine a worst-case future. You only have to look about 60 miles southwest at Medina Lake. Medina Lake was once a sparkling reservoir in the hill country west of San Antonio. It was one of the oldest artificial lakes in Texas, built in the early 1900s to serve agricultural irrigation in the region. For most of its history, it was a place of beauty. Houseboats, waterfront properties, bass fishing tournaments, summer vacations. Families built generational traditions around it. Then the droughts came, and Medina Lake did not recover. At its lowest point in recent history, the lake had lost so much water that it sat at less than 1% of its total capacity. Less than 1%. The docks stood in cracked mud. The boat launches led nowhere. The waterfront properties became lakefront in name only, their views replaced by a flat baking expanse of sun-cracked earth. The businesses that had survived for decades simply ceased to have a reason to exist. Medina Lake became a preview, a photograph from a possible future that no one in the hill country wants to develop. There is a term used by water resource managers that sounds technical, but describes something devastatingly simple: deadpool. Deadpool is the level at which a reservoir can no longer release water through its normal outlets. It is the point at which the water surface drops so low that the intake pipes and outflow gates are no longer submerged. At deadpool, a reservoir stops being a functioning water supply. It becomes a puddle, a remnant, a memory of what used to be there. For the communities that depend on a reservoir, deadpool is not a technical threshold. It is a system collapse. It means the infrastructure built around that water source, the treatment plants, the pipelines, the delivery systems, simply stops having anything to deliver. Cities that rely on that water begin operating on emergency reserves, then on emergency plans, then on something harder to name and harder to manage. Canyon Lake is not at deadpool, but the rate at which it is losing water, 34 million gallons a day, means that the conversation about what happens if conditions do not change has moved from theoretical to urgent. The cities that depend on Canyon Lake are paying attention. New Braunfels, Canyon Lake, the community, parts of San Marcos. These are places where water managers are watching reservoir levels the way a pilot watches a fuel gauge over open ocean. Close, constantly, with a very specific kind of alertness. Water restrictions have already been implemented across parts of the region, limiting outdoor irrigation, car washing, and other non-essential uses. Residents have been asked to cut back. Some have not. And even the ones who have cut back understand that individual conservation, while meaningful, cannot offset 34 million gallons a day lost to evaporation and drought conditions that individual behavior cannot control. The situation has forced some water utilities into decisions that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. At least one regional water provider has declined to approve service connections for new housing developments, not because of bureaucratic delay or zoning disputes, but because there is not enough water. Full stop. No water available, development denied. That decision carries enormous weight. In a region defined by growth, A water utility saying it cannot support new customers is not a minor administrative note. It is a signal. It is the system telling the developers, the real estate agents, the investors, and the families moving to the area that the foundational resource underneath all of it is no longer guaranteed. Water resource experts who study this region describe a situation that is being driven by two forces colliding at the same time. The first is surface water loss. The lake is dropping because rainfall across the watershed has been below average for an extended period. The Guadalupe River, which feeds Canyon Lake, is carrying less water than it historically has. Less input combined with constant evaporation and ongoing municipal demand produces the 34 million gallon daily deficit that is slowly, visibly, measurably draining the reservoir. The second force is underground. The aquifers beneath the Texas Hill Country, particularly the Trinity Aquifer, which underlies much of the region, are also under stress. As surface water becomes less reliable, more people and more systems pump from underground sources to compensate. But those aquifers recharge slowly. They were filled over thousands of years by rainwater filtering through limestone. They do not refill on a human timeline. They do not respond to one good rain season. Draw from them faster than they recharge, and eventually you pull down the water table to a point where even the deepest wells begin to reach for water that is no longer there. Both things are happening simultaneously. The lake is falling from above. The aquifer is being drawn down from below. The region is being squeezed from both directions at once. Walk out to the shore of Canyon Lake today, and the evidence is written into the landscape in a language that requires no translation. The bathtub ring, that pale white band of exposed limestone running along the canyon walls above the current waterline, marks where the surface used to be. Depending on conditions, that ring can sit 10, 15, 20 feet above the water. It is not graffiti. It is not erosion. It is a record, a geological timestamp showing exactly how much has been lost. Old boat ramps now end in dry dirt. Marina operators have had to extend their docks repeatedly, chasing the retreating waterline further and further from shore. Some have had to relocate operations entirely because the water simply is not where the infrastructure was built to meet it. Kayak rental businesses, fishing guides, watercraft dealers, all of them are operating in a landscape that looks less like the one they built their businesses around with every passing season. The vacation rental industry, which exploded in the Texas Hill Country during and after the pandemic as remote work freed people to live anywhere, is beginning to feel the effects as well. Properties marketed on the basis of lake access are finding that lake access means something different than it used to. The dock that was included in the listing photographs may now be 300 feet from water. The swimming area shown in the brochure may be dry ground. Tourism does not evaporate as quickly as lake water, but it trends toward the same direction when the experience no longer matches the expectation. There is a broader pattern at work here that water scientists and regional planners have been trying to communicate for years, often without the urgency the situation deserves. The Texas Hill Country, along with much of the American Southwest, is in the middle of a multi-decadal shift in its hydrological baseline. What that means in plain language is this: the amount of water the region can expect to receive, on average, over a long period of time, is declining. The wet years still happen, the floods still come, but the average, the reliable middle ground that planning and infrastructure are built around, is moving downward. The new normal is drier. The new normal is hotter. The new normal demands more from a water supply that is producing less. And into this new normal, the Texas Hill Country is adding more people, more homes, more demand, more development, at a rate that assumes the old normal still exists. That assumption is the crack in the foundation. That assumption is where the crisis lives. The communities of the Hill Country are not passive in the face of this. Conservation programs are expanding. Water recycling initiatives are being developed. Regional planning conversations are happening at levels of seriousness and urgency that would have felt alarmist 5 years ago. Some municipalities are exploring desalination of brackish groundwater as a long-term supplement. Others are investing in aquifer storage and recovery systems designed to bank water underground during wet periods and draw it back during dry ones. These are not small efforts. They reflect genuine commitment from people who understand what is at stake. But they are also efforts being mounted against a deficit of 34 million gallons a day, in a region that continues to grow, in a climate that continues to warm, with a timeline that is compressing faster than the solutions can scale. The math is not cruel. The math is simply indifferent. Water does not negotiate. It does not wait for infrastructure projects to be completed, or for legislation to pass, or for public awareness campaigns to change behavior. It continues to evaporate, to seep away, to flow downstream at whatever rate physics and climate dictate. And right now, physics and climate are dictating 34 million gallons a day. There is a question that sits underneath all of this, unspoken in most public conversations, but present in every water manager's office, in every rancher's well report, in every marina operator's end-of-season accounting. What does this region look like when the water is truly gone? Not theoretically gone, not modeled in a spreadsheet gone, actually physically, visibly gone, the way Medina Lake nearly went, the way other reservoirs in the American West have gone, the way lakes disappear when the inputs stop and the demand does not. What does a city of hundreds of thousands of people do when the reservoir, depends on crosses into deadpool? What does the economy of a region built around outdoor water recreation do when the water is no longer there to recreate on? What does a family do when the well runs dry and the water utility has nothing left to deliver? These are not hypothetical questions being asked by activists or researchers looking to alarm people. These are operational questions being asked quietly, seriously, by the people responsible for making sure that water flows out of every tap in the Texas Hill Country tomorrow morning. Canyon Lake is not gone. It is still there. The Guadalupe River still flows into it. Rain still falls on the watershed, sometimes heavily. There will be wet seasons again. There will be recoveries, partial and temporary, that will ease the visible signs of stress for a time. But the trajectory, the long, slow, measurable direction that this is moving, has not reversed. 34 million gallons a day is not a crisis that one good rainstorm erases. It is a signal. It is the landscape communicating something that the region has not yet fully decided how to hear. The people who built their lives around Canyon Lake understood something when they chose this place. They understood that water is not just a resource, it is the reason. It is what makes a place livable, lovable, worth returning to, worth building on, worth calling home. What they could not have known, what no one fully anticipated, is that the thing they came for, the thing everything else was built around, might one day begin to disappear beneath them, 34 million gallons at a time. The white ring on the canyon wall keeps climbing. The boat ramps keep ending in dust. The lake keeps falling. And somewhere in the Texas Hill Country tonight, someone whose family has lived on this water for 3 generations is standing at the shoreline, looking out at a surface that is lower than it was yesterday, and asking the only question that matters anymore: how much is left?